Welcome to Inspired Artist Podcast with me, Porter Singer. In this episode, I'm speaking with Madi Das, and he has been nominated for a Grammy again for his New Age Chant Album. That's the category. Maybe we'll talk about that. So very exciting to be talking with him. Dave Stringer was the producer on that, and I also did an episode with him. I'll just read you a little bit about Madi Das, and then we'll begin the chat. So he was born to an American mom and German dad. Madi Das grew up in the Vaishnava tradition of Bhakti Yoga. At age 7, he went to boarding school in India, where he studied sacred chants, became fluent in Hindi. Ooh, that's cool. And made lifelong friends. Now living in Melbourne, when he's not sharing music with his community, he works in film production. In 2015, his debut album, Bhakti Without Borders, was nominated for a Grammy, and Mantra Americana is his long-awaited follow-up album. It's such a great album, and that's the one that was just nominated. So here we go, let's get into it.
Thank you, Porter. So happy to be able to speak with you today.
Yeah, me too. You have this like beautiful glow streaming in your
yeah, I can't avoid the sunshine, but I'm just cold, so I'm just enjoying it on my back.
It's hard to avoid the sunshine in Australia, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It's also like summer there, no?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a pivot, but yeah, being in the Southern Hemisphere, Christmas time and the holidays, when you hear all the carols that have, a white Christmas and snow and let it snow, it's not the case down here. We're very much a go to the beach, have picnics, shirts off, swimming, summertime, holiday season.
That's really sweet. That's cool. Is that something you've been doing for a while, living in Australia?
Yeah, so my family and I moved down here in 2015, so 7 years now. This is so the kids were really young when they moved, and now they're turning into teenagers.
That's cool. Yeah, I love Melbourne. I happened to be there for the Commonwealth Games a while ago. It must have been like 2008 or something, 2009 maybe, but it was such a fun time to be there, and I'd always wanted to go to Australia. You're like just a
Yeah, I think I need to move because it's like you can't see anything. This is kind of ridiculous.
It's like you're all orb.
Let me just fix it. Okay, I think that's a bit better.
That's great. That's great. I mean, it was sort of like a godly, spiritual, like
it was too much. The second coming of Madi Das. Yeah, well, we're actually gearing up for the Commonwealth Games, which are going to be hosted in the state where Melbourne is in a couple of years now. So that's full circle. It's a hugely sporting country. Big on outdoors and swimming and the Olympics. It's a very big part of their cycle.
Oh, right. It's a sports thing. This is really silly. That's not what I experienced at all. I experienced the art festival that they did along with it.
Ah, okay. Yeah, no, the Commonwealth Games, games parts is the sport.
Yeah, but when I think about being there, I think about like all these cool entertainment things that were going on. Yeah. Oh, cool. Okay. So, well, maybe I should head back again. That sounds like fun. Are you, you do sound like you grew up in the States though.
So this is a weird international accent that, military army brats and people who went to boarding school or international schools have. My mom is American, so that's part of the kind of semi-American part of the accent, but my father's German. And I grew up somewhere between India and Ireland in my formative years. I did a couple years in Pennsylvania at a school there when I was 5. So there is some American DNA coming through my voice, and you hear it in my music.
Yeah. That's interesting. I had an international background as well, so I knew a lot of kids who would flip between accents sometimes. Do you like have an Irish accent that you pull out sometimes?
I can do many accents, including many Irish accents. I usually I have to put them on, so it's intentional. However, when I speak with Indian people, I kind of slip into Hinglish, which is half Hindi, and half English with an Indian accent, and
Yeah.
all my coworkers at my office are not sure what's happening. They're like, "Why are you speaking on the phone?" "Oh, I'm talking to India, and we learned English with an Indian accent, and so that's how we communicate." I had to learn an American accent kind of when I went back to the States when I was 18, but I couldn't hear it. I was learning from Indian teachers, and that I was like, "What accent? This is my accent."
That's so funny. My best friend in college was from New Delhi, and she told me about how she thought it was so strange that people thought she had an accent. She's like, "You have an accent."
Yeah, exactly. I was like, "What? This is my native accent," and they're
Right.
like, "Okay, listen, we get that you like The Simpsons and you're trying to do a poo. You do a really good accent." I was like, "This is my accent."
That's so funny. So when you're talking to people on the phone, you're talking to like other kids that went to school with you?
No, no. Well, so my day job, or how I pay the bills, is I work for the local state government film commission, and so part of that is I'm bringing film and television productions to film in Melbourne, Australia. So when I'm talking to Indian producers, it's just natural to um, just slip into English or Hindi sometimes, and so that just kind of happens.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so the two worlds collide, but it's
They
not.
do.
Yeah,
They do. Yeah.
interesting.
Well, yeah, not unnaturally. I mean, I'm at work and they're like, "Okay, who's going to talk to the Indian producers?" Well, maybe the guy who speaks Indian grew up there.
And probably understands a lot of the social norms and
Yeah.
like ways of communicating that are not just linguistic too. Like,
Also, the ways of making things in India is very different from the West.
mm,
So it's a whole different production language that you kind of have to understand how it's a little more fluid and not necessarily as rigid as the way they make things in Hollywood.
gotcha. Well, so I didn't realize that you had a film background too, but Dave also has a film background and in India. That's because I didn't realize that until I talked to him on this podcast, but that's what he was telling me about.
Yeah, well, yeah, so we both share a few different love languages. One is that we both had a background in film. I went to USC for film, and my whole, career has been in film and television production. Um, but we also share kind of a love of Western style music that also clashes up against Indian music. And we're also very kind of practical, which it sounds like sure, but a lot of artists are not, so there's a lot of artistic exploration that doesn't see the light of day. But Dave's very, and I'm kind of from the German side of me, like, okay, what's the deadline? What's the next step? How are we going to turn something that's an idea into something that's a real thing?
Hmm. Yeah, cool. Well, speaking of which, so this is the second time that an album that you two have created together has been nominated in what is now called the New Age Chant.
Yeah, well, so that's right. So Dave and I have collaborated. We collaborated 7 years ago on Bhakti Without Borders. He was the producer on that, and it was an album of duets for charity where we featured 11 female artists singing with me and donated all of the profits to fund education for girls in India. That was an album that was nominated for a Grammy, but at the time, the only category where these types of albums where Krishnadas' album and Jai Uttal's album were nominated is in the new age category because I didn't know where to put it, and it's kind of like, okay, well, Ravi Shankar, the Beatles, wishy washy, something new age, and I think that we obviously didn't win. We were just happy to be representing Kirtan there. But I think part of the growing sense over the years has been that really from not just chant artists in the mantra music, Vaishnava tradition, Bhakti tradition, but from artists around the world who take Eastern or any kind of traditional ancient chant, that music is being misidentified as new age,
Mm.
when it's essentially quite old age. It's probably some of the oldest music tradition in the world. So we did collaborate with Sean Johnson and Catherine Marie Charlton and several other people contributed to a proposal to change the name so that it includes the term chant. and ambient, because there's a lot of ambient artists who work in quite avant-garde, soundscapey stuff that isn't really new age music. So that's a big change that's come in this year, and the category is now named New Age Ambient or Chant Album, and we've been nominated a second time. And my second collaboration with Dave. This time he's also an artist on the album. He plays so many of the instruments, and he features in the vocals. So we're both excited to be back at it again, I guess.
Yeah. It's a really wonderful album. I mean, I really
Thank you.
I contacted you because I had been listening to it so much, and I was like, oh, I'd really love to talk to him. Yeah, it's really, I don't know, it's accessible, it's pretty, it's, it's meditative, it feels good. Like I've been really enjoying it. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It was intimidating to follow up a nominated album with like, what's your next thing? And also moving country with my family, just took a while to get back to music, but the pandemic really allowed us to kind of focus, and Dave was grounded. He couldn't go anywhere, so he was prisoner, and had no choice but to collaborate with me on this. We had been talking about it before the pandemic about doing a follow-up, and I'd been working on songs, but really this time, I think just the process of being in isolation allowed us to take a few more risks, leave a few more mistakes in, if you will, take things out, put them in, just have fun, and try and make something that we wanted to make. We didn't have a label saying you need to make this. We had complete freedom to just make what the music in our hearts was. And so we're really happy with the way it turned out. I think really at its heart, it's Dave and I, and kicking ideas back and forth, but then we have these amazing, harmony musicians, like Justin and Tulsi and Ali, and then, James Hara and Justin Corbin and Patrick Ritchie coming back from the first album, just really has a warm hug of a sound that just kind of evolved naturally.
And you were doing all of this long distance, right? You were in
I
Australia.
haven't seen anyone. Yeah, it still haven't. I haven't seen Dave since before the pandemic, and I haven't met anyone
Are
else in real
you
life apart from Ali.
are you going to the ceremony?
Yeah, I'd like to. I think we're planning on it. So we'll see. Yeah.
Well,
I haven't booked my ticket yet,
yeah.
is the short answer, but I'd like to go
Yeah.
see everyone and celebrate the music.
What what did you feel like when you got the news? Like what was that experience like?
Um, I think it was strange second time round, because it's always first thing in the morning when I wake up, and all of a sudden text messages start flooding in. But at the same time, I felt really excited for chant music, because I think, being the first year that chant's represented in the name of the category that we're nominated in to be representing, our community was really special. And so I am conscious that, on some level, this is a nomination for this album, but on another level, it's a nomination for mantra music and kirtan and bhakti music.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that is true. And there were so many, like there were so many albums that were in the running that were chant in that. I mean, because I read it and I voted, um, which was pretty exciting too. I think that there were just so many people submit.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of the work that Dave and Sean and them are doing with the Oracle Collective. We're really trying to build the presence, and encourage chant musicians, mantra musicians, kirtan artists to get involved. Because if you're, not involved, you're out of sight, out of mind, and they don't know you're there. And it's a strange thing a little bit, because really the primary way our music is experienced is live. It's not the recorded version. The recorded version is kind of a memorialization, almost like a take home CD that you buy at a concert to remind you of that fun time you had, the live experience. But I think it is a wider reaching or instantly anytime accessible version of the tradition, and the mantras are there still as powerful. You don't necessarily get the same, that electric vibe when you're in a room full of people who are singing their hearts out because you're making that music together. But it is a different and also important way to share the music that I have. I can't be everywhere at once in a room would be great. And so I think seeing, shifting that focus to try and get chant musicians to represent their art, but also on that level of the highest, music award is really important. And so it was really exciting to see all those artists kind of on the ballot this year, and seeing, so many different chant musicians, eligible to be voted for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have any sort of sense of how, like, who that body is? Because I know we're supposed to just vote in the category that we work in.
Mm.
I feel like I have a good sense of maybe like who the chant artists are or stuff, but I have no kind of idea of what the scope of that, is it thousands of people? Is it hundreds of people? Is it hundreds of, do you have any sort of sense of it?
Um, well, I think the Academy has a membership of somewhere between probably 15 and 20,000 people. They don't say, but it really is, to be a member who votes, you have to be an artist. So you can be an engineer or a producer, but a recording artist. It's not labels or promoters. So that's the whole prestige of it, is that it's your peers who know music, and like music and understand it, who are voting. Specifically, there's a rule that you should be voting in the fields, or you're only allowed to vote in 3 fields, and that's a way to try and keep people voting who have knowledge of the actual genre that you're making the music in. So of those 15 or 20,000 people, how many are actually voting in New Age? There's 80 categories, or 80
Yeah.
fields. So it's probably a lot less who vote in that. Obviously the artists who are in it will vote in that field because they usually at least vote for yourself. But there's a couple of related fields, like global music it has a little bit of crossover, contemporary instrumental. There's similarities in the genre between New Age and that people who vote in those fields probably stick to that area. I'm totally guessing. I don't think that's a published thing, but I think
Yeah.
it's somewhere about that.
So do you do much live nowadays?
Yeah, I almost every Sunday. Sometimes this last weekend, Saturday and Sunday, and 2 gigs on Sunday. We're not talking about major, but just intimate, with either with friends or a local temple or yoga studio, as much as possible. And my daughter as well, she's learning music, so it's good to also give her a shot on the mic and bring her up in the tradition. So it's something that is very much a part of my practice and my life.
Registration is now open for the January songwriting series. It will be 5 sessions starting Tuesday, January 3rd. And this will be for people, not necessarily musicians, who have been wanting to write a song. Songwriting has been an instrumental part of my own processing and healing. And so I wanted to share this as a way, as a vehicle for you to get that inner world of yours and turn it into something tangible. This is such an amazing example of how thoughts can become things, about how we can manifest something from our inner world into our reality as song, as music, as an offering. So if this is something that you would like to explore with me and others who will be joining, you can go to portersinger.com/community.
Because you were brought up, you were telling me before we started, but maybe we should fill everybody in who hasn't heard your other interview. But you were, well, I guess I also read that, but I mean, you were brought up in the Vaishnava tradition, the Vaishnava. Is that how you would say it?
Yeah, that's the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, to get technical. But yes, my parents were Vaishnavas, and I was born in a Vaishnava family and raised, in kirtans my whole life, every day. And then I went to, Vaishnava schools from the age of 5. And,
In India from the age of 5?
no, so in Pennsylvania, there was a school near Port Royal for 2 years, and then in India from the age of 7.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Did you come home like for vacations and stuff, or were you in India for like big chunks?
No, yeah, I think in the summers when it was really hot, the school would send at least the white kids home. Some of the Indian kids would stay, but we would go home for the summer and then come back in after the monsoon. And so it would be once a year that you'd see your family.
Wow. I almost feel silly asking if that was hard because it feels like that would be hard.
Yeah, definitely hard. And I think you spend the whole year dreaming about all the menus of what you're going to eat when you get home and what you're going to have your mom cook, or what kind of your favorite snacks are. That some of the Western boys would, get to see movies, and then because we didn't have TV or movies in India, then you'd spend the year telling the story. Tell me the story of Back to the Future, and everyone would gather around, and we'd all sit there, and they would blow by blow tell you, oh, you told it better last time. Remember the part, you've missed the part where Marty McFly, and so who's seen The Predator? Oh, we seen The Predator. Look, just coming to theaters, not theaters, talk circles in India. So, all of those 80s movies, we got to experience. The Terminator, Indiana Jones. We got the spirit in the oral tradition. The audiobook was live and well before the audiobook was live and well.
Oh, that's really funny. So that's funny. I totally different experience. I had my parents there, but I grew up in France, and I remember vividly like feeling the need, like just wanting to go back to the States because that's where all the things were. But I went to Mexico with my kids recently for like 4 months, and they felt that longing too. But I was like, you guys, you have Netflix, you have YouTube, like you have access to so many things that I would have dreamed of.
Oh my God, yeah. In India, like the West, the American boys would bring Tang. That was like a big thing, Tang, and you put a little piece on your hand, and you would lick the Tang. Or Kool-Aid powder. Oh my God, they would trade it like contraband. There was a whole black market trade in Kool-Aid that was happening because it was like this revolutionary powder that you could put into water and turn into a beverage. It's amazing.
Revolutionary powder. I like that. So what did you get from that experience, would you say?
Um, so many things. I think resilience, probably survivalism. You could plonk me anywhere in the world and I'll probably figure out what to do. But culturally, I think language. I speak Hindi. I speak passable Bengali. Understand Sanskrit. The festivals and I mean, I guess kirtan, as far as the soundtrack to my life, was hugely a part of living in India. Festivals, food, basically all my formative years were there. So, it's strange because, if you look at me, I just look like your average Caucasian white dude. But as far as how I self-identify or what's most native to me is I still feel most comfortable with Indian music and food and festivals and that whole culture in Lulu is very much a part of my psyche.
Yeah. The music that you recorded for this album, at least the newer one, is definitely more Western kind of harmonies and chords and stuff like that. Do you when you play live or are you working in raga and stuff, or do you prefer kind of
It's
Western
so
sound?
the live is a lot more traditional because I don't have well, Dave plays so many instruments. Even if I played live with Dave, we'd still need a full band complimenting to play all the instruments that he can only play one at a time. But so usually when I do live, it's harmonium, mridangam, kartal, sometimes a guitar, sometimes a flute. But as far as raga goes, the melodies and the tunes are very much that kind of what you're hearing on the album. So those are melodies that are kind of a mishmash of Indian melodies that have kind of been funneled through the Western Vaishnava Bhakti tradition and been transformed with, sometimes I leave in the Western pronunciation, just the R instead of the R, just because it's a flavor and I like it, and it's something that's natural to me. So as far as the melody, all of that there's not much difference in my phrasing, but really where the collaboration with Dave has come in is really, we looked around and what are the instruments he plays. I don't play a musical instrument. I play percussion. I play mridangam and kartal and cajon. Those are my kind of contributions, and then the melody. And then Dave, is quite multi-talented. He's played guitar, he plays the pedal steel, he plays harmonica, he plays organ, he plays piano, he plays a dulcimer. And so a lot of that instrumentation come from his background that are very Western, but also bring that kind of country flavor, bluegrass flavor. And that's kind of the intersectionality of the project is we're melding. Both of us we're both bilingual in the music traditions of East and West.
Ooh, I like that. Bilingual in the music. I just have to.
Yes, write that down.
If you see me typing, I'm not distracted. I'm just making use of all of the wonderful things you're saying. Writing them down. Music traditions of East and West. I like that.
It's I think we were calling it country and Eastern, mantra Americana. Right. But if you were to distill it down to edible allegories, it's a pie and chai. American pie and Indian chai. They go nicely together, by the way, I
love that. Yes, they do. Yeah. That's really cool. Is there a big community of Vaishnav? I'm sorry, and I'm saying that. Is it Vaishnava or
yeah.
Vaishnav? Like a big Vaishnav community in Melbourne?
Yeah, there is. There's a large, some Western, but a lot of Indian Vaishnavas. Quite a large community here. There's also a farm community about 2 hours away, where they kind of they have a lot of cows and are doing organic farming down there. There's several farms in Australia, but also city communities. So it's it's probably not as big as it was in the heyday of the 70s and 80s, but and a lot more Indian focused. I think that they've really taken up the temples and really become part of it and become involved. So I think it's but the tradition is alive and well in Australia.
That's neat. Yeah. Is there how does that kind of, I mean, because I know every culture has kind of a different way of embracing its immigrants. And like, what do you notice about that interaction between, like, there's no real, I mean, there are native Australians, but but I mean, like the white Australians, I guess, like what's the interaction?
It's a different but compatible flavor. I think there is a certain type of seeker, or someone who's inquisitive and searching for spiritual meaning that connects to the philosophy and the tradition here in Australia. And that's kind of how most of the non-Indian members connect. I think the Indian community, it's a heritage, it's a culture, it's it's almost like a home base where, you know, they're here out of their home country in this, you know, in Australia as a minority. But here's a place they can go to worship, to get married, to have festivals, to bring their newborn babies, and so there's a deep cultural connection for them. And but they, you know, they all both kind of cohorts exist, you know, in harmony. I think when I first came, I was like, oh wow. They thought I was like some white dude, which I am. And I'm like, don't you know I'm part of this tradition? This is I feel comfortable here too. But over the years, I think we've all just realized it's not relevant so much what your ethnicity is. We all share the same love of this culture and of bhakti and the tradition of celebrating a personal aspect of God, and connecting with each other through singing and praying.
Yeah. Is that something that, how should I put this? Given how difficult the experience of being in India for you, was there ever a time when you didn't want to be part of this, or where you felt a little bit rebellious or angry, or?
For sure. For sure. Well, I think I would say I kind of dissect it, or delineate. I'm not, you know, there was stages of my life where I'm not super religious, you know, as far as in the Latin sense of religio, the rules, you know, and that's a different thing, religion versus faith, and even culture. So I've always, you know, even if I wasn't feeling, you know, that I was strictly wanting to be part of the whole religious aspect, or there can be in our tradition, but any tradition, or any religion, organized religion, a lot of what can be overbearing rules and regulations. Some of them, you know, are driven by, you know, designs for power and control, which anytime you take something divine but add a human element, the ego creeps in and people are like, well, how can I use this for myself or to control other things? So all of that aspect is what I think is over the years thought of as less useful to my faith. I think that's not, you know, I think whenever you think of saints and God and what's at the heart of tradition is bringing people up, caring for your fellow man or woman, or service to others. That those are kind of at the core of pretty much any religious faith. And that I've always kind of believed in. I think it's when you get the mortal ego involved that some of this gets bastardized over centuries, or even in a short time, where people are thinking of using that kind of sense of innocence or sincere desire to, you know, have a connection through faith against them as a mechanism of control. And so I guess I'll say I have varying degrees of religious interest over the years, but really I think I've always kept the faith on some level, and definitely the culture has always been inseparable from my identity.
Hmm.
I don't know
Yeah.
if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's I mean, it's very complex, right? Like the ways
Hmm.
that we learn to self-identify. I mean, what we feel is home, you know, like it's hard to see
Yeah,
where that starts and we begin, and you know, um,
and that's another thing with growing up in a boarding school, where you pretty much have to say goodbye to your parents when I was 5, essentially. And you know, we moved around a lot, so where is home? And for me and a lot of my cohort, it is the other kids who share that upbringing. That's the common denominator. And so we're, you know, I guess similar to people who, you know, go to the army or whatever. You know, when you come out, you still really crave, because you're a third culture. You're not, you know, someone who I'm living in America. When I was living there, I'm not American, and I don't really connect on that level with Americans. And if I go back to India, I'm not really Indian. And so the only other people who really get the Franken person culturally that we are other kids who share that experience, or other kids who like in the Kundalini tradition might have a similar experience. It's also somewhat easy to relate to kids who grow up at international schools. That just third culture people are a unique breed. They find it hard to fit in with anyone but other people who are third culture on that deep level.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by this particular aspect of what you said, because I remember falling or happening upon a video of this Japanese girl whose parents were British. Sorry, so she was a British girl who had grown up in Japan, so she doesn't look Japanese. And I was just visualizing like what that experience would be for you based on like this video that I watched. But when I was in France, I could pass for French. I don't look non-French, like there's nothing about me where they're like, there's no way you're French, because I sound French. I could be French until they hear my parents. Then they're like, you're not French. But I could pass. But you can't pass as Indian. I would imagine, just as she can't pass as Japanese. But it must be such an interesting kind of nuance about that whole experience, that you feel something that you could never inhabit.
It's interesting because because I speak Hindi and I learned it at a young age, I don't really have an accent, and so Indians would look at me like on a train or in a train for long hours, and I look Western, and then I would speak to them in Hindi, and they're like, "Oh, I thought you were Western. You must be from Kashmir or somewhere."
Right.
And they would make the leap to my ethnicity based on how I sound really quickly. And then when I'd moved to America and I had this weird Indian accent, they'd be like, "We don't know, what to do with you, because you look one way, you sound some way, but we don't have anywhere to place you." I think it was never in doubt that I was like an Indian when I was in school, though. I think it was very clear I was pretty pasty white and getting sunburnt, and so I didn't speak to many people outside the school, so they would just see Western kids going, and they would be pretty emotionally happy. I think I would say that's something about Indians. It's a generalization, but in my experience, there's been nothing but joy that someone from another culture has really sincerely trying to learn your culture, taken the time to learn your language, and adopt all of those customs. There's never been any sense that, who are you coming to my country and trying to do this. I think they're really welcoming.
That's nice. Must be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What an sorry, just what an amazing life experience. Your kids obviously have a very different life experience.
Yeah.
How you've given them a very different experience. Were you kind of consciously trying to make it a little easier for them, or?
Look, I don't think. Yeah, I mean, it was a austere experience, and I think those schools are better now. There still are ashram schools in India, but I don't think we would send. We had a choice not to send our kids. I think there's just not enough supervision, is the short explanation. I like to put your kid on the other side of the world when I kind of want to have that connection. If you're outsourcing your parenting, you kind of miss out on their childhood and then wonder why you don't have a relationship when you're an adult. And that's something that I kind of, with my parents, has been a product. I still have parents, but they're these weird, not that they're weird, they're, in my mind, the relationship is somewhat, at arm's length, because in my mind, they're an idea of someone, a parent that lives somewhere else. And we've missed out on all those formative years of connection. And so you can't really get that back in the same way by, hey, I'm ready to be a parent now that you're in your 20s. This just doesn't happen. You need to kind of be there for all those, bruises and scrapes and first boyfriends, or, all of those, that's part of parenting. And so we decided to, raise them in the West and take them to the temple and preserve whatever traditions we can, but they're growing up in a normal school. Part of that was also because it was super hard to come out of somewhere like India and then be faced with such a deficit in social cultural capital, where you just came from the moon and know nothing about, I know Marty McFly, a couple of different touchstones, but so much, it's just such a hard gap to bridge, without anyone expecting, like if you were an Indian coming to America in your 20s, people go, oh, there's a cultural lack of understanding that people are accommodating. But if you look white and they're like, why are you such a Encino man? We don't, this is, and so I think that, looking at wanting to get an education in university and be able to fit in if you want to in a workforce, I think it was just something that it was hard for me, and I'd probably want different for my children.
Yeah. When you were saying that, I was thinking it's so ironic actually, because when you went to school in India, and when a lot of the kids that I know who went to school in India, there was no FaceTime, there was no Zoom, so the fact that you're having this realization that there's no supervision, like it was so much less when you went as well. I mean, I don't know if that's an irony, but it's a stark, yeah, it is irony. It's a stark difference, right? Like you feel the pang of the lack of supervision, and yet you have so many more resources than we're at our disposal.
Yeah, I don't know if the schools in India let you FaceTime your kid,
Yeah.
But I think, even all
Email.
of that, it's not the same as supervising what's happening when you're not on FaceTime, or being able to be there for them. I think that's it does affect you on a deep psychological level of not having that safety net of your parents. I think, primally humans, it's where they turn when you run into difficulty in your childhood, and to not have that, the pros and cons, right? You learn to really be self-sufficient, self-reliant, but at the same time, it does come at the cost of being vulnerable and sensitive, and having a relationship with your parents.
Yeah. Yeah. So did Australia feel, I mean, Australia feels different than the United States. Does it feel a little bit more like home in terms of like the way people are culturally? Are they a little bit more community oriented than in the United States?
No, I think they're worse.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah, I think Australia has a very frontiers like element to the psyche, where it's like, we're here, this is my area.
And for yourself.
Yeah, I think Americans have it. There is a kind of neighborly, have people over, show up with a casserole, greet the new neighbors vibe, where here it's a little bit more, hey, if we've known each other for 7 years, you can come. Yeah.
60s.
Well, I mean, but it is, they're quick to talk to you at the checkout aisle in America, and, say hi and stuff. Whereas here it's a little bit more along the British line of a bit more conservative. And it takes a while to break through and, be invited to someone's home. So I think that was, finding our tribe, our community down here was super important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's funny as you describe that. I'm like, I feel like I live in the Melbourne of the United States then, because that's sort of like
That's back. Well, I mean, depends. Where do you live? Are you in a
I live near
frontier state?
Seattle. No, I live near Seattle.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think maybe it's just the idea, but I do think, at least superficially, Americans are, they like to talk and say hi, and there's a kind of puritanical, what's the Christian pastoral care, obligation to the community, whereas Australia is a lot less religious than America, and a lot more kind of, it's just something that deep rooted comes from, being in the new world and all of a sudden having to stake your claim and defend your borders.
Yeah.
They're very strong about immigration. They're very strong about, trespassing, and all of that's a real, this is mine.
Okay. Well, I used to live in Phoenix and people were very friendly there. Like very, so I think it depends where you are in the States, but
yeah.
really wanted to talk to you like everywhere you go. And then if you go to the South, then it's like people really want to talk to you. And it's not even like chit chat. It's like you're having a whole conversation with the person at the store, which I kind of like. Yeah. So thank you so much for doing this. Is there anything else?
I think we talked about a lot of other stuff.
We covered a lot of ground here. Was there something else that you wanted to mention about, your music or anything else that's going to be going on or anything like that?
No. Oh, well, yes, actually. So, this was only half of the project. We recorded 11 songs, and so there's a whole second half of Mantra Americana that's going to be coming out next year. So I think we thought we'd break it up into 2 small EPs rather than releasing everything at once, as a way of the first album or this album can be a bit of a teaser or promote the second one as well. So if you like the first 5 songs, there's more where that came from, and we're excited to be working on that for release next year.
Oh, wonderful. Well, that's good news. And if people want to stay in touch with you or find out more about you, I will put a link in the show notes. Where should they go do that?
I think probably if you go to bhaktiwithoutborders.com, is probably the simplest, because that has a link to our Instagram and Facebook, and there's also a email sign up, kind of subscribe sort of component, so you can stay in touch.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this, especially with this time difference. It's a pretty epic, because it's not even just time, it's also a different day there, right?
We're from the future. I'm speaking you like Back to the Future. I finally was able to fly. I was finally able to go.
I'm really happy for you.
I'm speaking to you from Wednesday, and I think it's Tuesday over there.
Whoa. Yeah, that's pretty exciting.
So the weather's good tomorrow.
It's snowing here, so I doubt it.
The weather's good here.
Yeah. Actually, I love snow, but it definitely is not that.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, that's not in my future. But yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much. And
My pleasure.
I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Bye.
Thanks for tuning into the podcast, y'all. Please like, subscribe, rate, comment, whatever the platform you listen to podcasts on offers you, as a way to let its algorithm know that you're enjoying these episodes. That really helps. Also, there's some links in the podcast description notes that allow you to support the podcast in a way that benefits you and us. So please check those out. And if you'd like to stay in touch with me, you can sign up for my mailing list at portersinger.com. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye.